We moved into Pinewood Estates to find peace, not war. But it didn't take long to realize we had unknowingly stepped into enemy territory. After more than a decade serving the city on the front lines of law enforcement, I thought I knew what danger looked like. I faced armed gang members, drug dens ready to explode, and hostage takers seconds from pulling the trigger. But nothing prepared me for Karen Whitmore. The neighborhood HOA president with a superiority complex, a clipboard, and a delusion of power that made her believe she ruled our street like a dictator in pearls. We'd barely begun unpacking when she showed up, eyes sharp, lips pursed, and judgment leaking from every pore. "Welcome to Pinewood Estates," she said with a fake smile and a tone that felt more like a threat than a greeting. She didn't look at me. She looked at Lila, my daughter, my 9-year-old autistic, joyful miracle. Lila was sitting on the sidewalk, humming as she colored chalk rainbows across the concrete, her way of expressing joy in a world that rarely meets her halfway. "We value order here," Karen said, eyeing Lila's artwork like it was graffiti on a church wall. Lila didn't even flinch. She smiled up and said, "Blue is the happiest color." Karen recoiled like the word happy was an insult. I should have known then. I should have packed back up and left. But we stayed, thinking maybe she'd calm down. Maybe she was just one of those wound-too-tight types. But I underestimated her obsession with control and her willingness to lash out when she didn't get it. The first warning came 3 days later, folded neatly into an envelope taped to our door. Violation, improper use of sidewalk space. Chalk art is not approved under HOA community standards. I actually laughed, thought it was ridiculous and ignored it. A kid drawing on the sidewalk with chalk? That's not vandalism. It's childhood. But Karen didn't stop. By the second week, we had received 3 formal violations. One claimed Lila's spinning in the driveway was distracting to passing vehicles. Another said the plastic animal toys she lined up along the porch rail disrupted visual uniformity. Who even says that? Still, I let it slide. I'd faced real threats. This woman was just a mosquito in my ear. I wanted to focus on Lila, settling her into our new home, helping her adjust to new routines and surroundings. She doesn't handle change easily, but she was doing better than expected. That chalk art wasn't just fun. It was therapy. It was her way of navigating the world. But Karen didn't care. One afternoon, Lila drew a large mural on the sidewalk, a city made of candy, animals wearing crowns, suns with musical notes for rays. It was beautiful. I even took pictures, but by evening, a 4th notice arrived. Graffiti reported final warning. My blood started to simmer. I went to the next HOA meeting, thinking maybe I could reason with her. Maybe if I explained how important these things were to my daughter, she'd find some human decency. But reason isn't in Karen's vocabulary. She cut me off mid-sentence. "I don't care if she's got issues," she snapped. "This neighborhood has standards." I clenched my jaw, kept my voice even. "Her name is Lila. She's not an issue. She's a child, a brilliant, autistic, kind-hearted child who isn't hurting anyone." Karen leaned forward with a smirk. "Then maybe she should stay inside where no one has to see all that." The room went silent. I stared at her, stunned, my hands curled into fists under the table. Not because I wanted to hit her, but because I'd been trained my whole life not to lose control in moments like this. Because in that moment, the warrior in me rose up and whispered, "She's not just a nuisance anymore. She's a threat." I didn't show my badge. Didn't tell her who I was. I let her believe I was just a quiet, single dad with a problem kid. That's what Karen wanted to believe. People like her thrive on control until they pick a fight with someone who knows how to end one. So I went home that night and watched Lila finish a chalk picture of a butterfly. She looked up and said, "This one is free. It flies over angry people and just keeps going." I smiled, but I didn't feel peace. I felt the calm before a storm. And when it came, Karen wouldn't see it coming. Because she didn't know what I did for a living. Didn't know I commanded SWAT units in the city. Didn't know I'd led raids in darkness, pulled children from hostage situations, negotiated with people far more dangerous than her. She didn't know that the quiet man next door had enough legal knowledge, tactical training, and institutional backing to dismantle her little HOA empire from the inside out. But most of all, she didn't know that I would do anything to protect my daughter. And when she finally crossed the line, when her words stopped being petty and started becoming dangerous, she would learn that the hard way. Because what Karen didn't realize was this: I don't just wear the badge. I lead the response when all other options fail. And I never fail when it matters. She picked a fight with the wrong family, and my patience was almost gone. It happened on a Saturday afternoon, the kind that should have been forgettable. Blue sky, coffee brewing, Lila humming quietly as she spun in the driveway, arms stretched like wings, her bare feet touching every patch of warm pavement. It was one of those rare moments where everything felt still, and I was almost convinced we were finally settling in. I stood by the window, sipping from my mug, watching her be free, innocent, unbothered, perfectly herself. But then I heard the raised voice, sharp and cracking the air like a whip. A scream, not Lila's, not mine, just pure hostility. I dropped the mug. It shattered on the floor. By the time I reached the front door and sprinted outside, what I saw made my entire body go cold. Karen Whitmore stood towering over Lila, who had crumpled to the concrete, curled up, arms over her head like she'd just heard a gunshot. Karen's face was flushed, wild, twisted with rage. In her hand was a phone, but her other hand was hovering near her waistband, right where a holster would sit. "I told you people to control your special needs brat," she screamed, spit flying. "If she doesn't stop acting like a freak, I'll shoot next time. I have a concealed carry permit." For a second, I thought I hadn't heard her right, but I had, and so had Lila. My little girl, my bright, beautiful, autistic daughter, was lying in a ball, trembling, her entire body overwhelmed by fear, overstimulation, and the brutal weight of being misunderstood. My vision narrowed. Everything else, neighbors watching from porches, the chirping birds, even the wind, just disappeared. My voice came out like ice. "Are you threatening my child?" Karen scoffed, puffed her chest like she was proud of herself, her phone still aimed at Lila like she was filming some kind of neighborhood horror story. "I'm protecting the neighborhood," she said. "You're the one who brought this chaos here." Her voice had no shame, no regret, no trace of humanity. My jaw tightened so hard I thought it might snap. I didn't raise my voice, didn't move a muscle. Because when you've spent your life in tactical operations, you learn that power doesn't need to yell. It needs to act. She didn't know who I was. She didn't know that the man standing in front of her had spent 15 years taking down criminal networks, walking into hostage situations where seconds meant lives, clearing rooms with the barrel of a rifle, reading threats in body language before a single move was made. She didn't know I could hear the slight rattle in her voice, knew she was bluffing about drawing her weapon, but that didn't matter. Bluff or not, she'd said the words. "I'll shoot next time." That was all I needed. I knelt beside Lila, whispered softly, "You're okay, sweetheart. I've got you." Her little fingers reached out and gripped mine like a lifeline. I stood back up and looked Karen dead in the eyes. She held my gaze for a second, then looked away. She muttered something under her breath, something about me raising a liability, and turned on her heel like the matter was done. But it wasn't done, not even close. "Better fix your daughter or I will," she spat over her shoulder, just loud enough for me to hear. That was it. That was the line. She'd crossed it, torched it, and danced on the ashes. I carried Lila. Inside, laid her gently on the couch, and gave her headphones and her favorite weighted blanket. She didn't speak, just stared blankly, rocking slightly. That hurt more than anything. Watching my daughter's safe world shatter because of a bitter woman's ego and fear. I stood up, went to my office, closed the door. Then I picked up the phone. "This is Captain Morales," I said. "I need a unit dispatched to my residence immediately. Possible threat to a minor armed civilian witness present. We're about to have a situation." There was a pause on the other end, then a voice I knew, Latour Bradley. "Copy that, Captain. Sending 2 cars. Do we need SWAT protocol?" I paused, glanced toward the hallway where Lila was still curled on the couch. "Not yet. But get legal. On standby. I want a full flag order in motion by sundown." He responded with the efficiency I expected. "Understood, sir." I hung up, took a breath, and stared out the window. Karen had no idea what she had just done. She thought this was a matter of neighborhood politics, of HOA codes and chalk drawings. She thought she could bully her way into control, that the worst she'd face was a warning letter or maybe a tense standoff at a community meeting. But this wasn't about flowers on the sidewalk anymore. This was about the safety of a child. This was about psychological harm, about a civilian, armed and volatile, threatening a disabled minor in broad daylight. And the best part? Every word she said had been caught on my front porch camera. Clear audio, full video. Evidence, undeniable, legally actionable. She wanted war? I'd show her what real enforcement looked like. And when this was over, she wouldn't just be voted off the HOA board. She'd be disarmed, discredited, maybe even detained. Because while she paraded around with her petty rules and her fragile ego, she forgot something critical. I don't just wear the badge. I train the people who get called when things go to hell. I'm not the dad you threaten. I'm not the neighbor you intimidate. I'm the one who plans precision strikes under pressure, who moves in silence and leaves no loophole untouched. I'm the one who closes cases with evidence, not emotion. Karen thought she was untouchable because she had a permit, because she thought no one would challenge her authority. But she picked the wrong target. She didn't just threaten my daughter, she declared war on a man who spent his life winning them. And now it was time to answer. Not with vengeance, not with violence, but with law, precision, and unstoppable truth. By Sunday morning, Pinewood Estates didn't feel like a peaceful suburban neighborhood anymore. It felt like a staging ground. Patrol units had quietly rolled in at sunrise. No sirens, no theatrics, just controlled, precise movement. My team knew how to move unseen until it was time to be seen. Karen Whitmore, still asleep behind her pristine windows, had no idea that a legal storm was about to tear through her carefully curated world. I didn't lead the team this time. I wasn't in tactical gear or barking commands, but I was there, standing beside my unmarked cruiser in plain clothes, arms folded as Lieutenant Bradley debriefed the officers one last time. Every member of that unit had worked with me before. They knew me not just as their commanding officer, but as a father now. Every glance they gave me before heading toward Karen's. Porch said the same thing. "We've got this." The legal groundwork was already solid. After reviewing the Ring camera footage, her clear threats, the words, "I'll shoot next time," and her final spit of venom, "Better fix your daughter, or I will." We had enough under the state's red flag law to request a temporary firearm removal. The judge granted it within hours. She'd made a credible threat to a minor. Her weapon wasn't just dangerous, it was now unlawful in her possession. As the officers approached, Karen stepped outside, coffee mug in one hand, robe flapping. At first, she smiled like she was about to deliver one of her passive-aggressive HOA lectures. But the second she saw the badges, saw how serious the expressions were, how the warrant was read out loud, her face twisted from confusion to outrage. "What is this? What is this nonsense?" she barked, stepping back. "You can't come onto my property. This is harassment." But she was wrong. We had a judge's signature and multiple pieces of damning evidence. Her weapon was retrieved from the nightstand, loaded and chambered. She started yelling louder, claiming she never said those things, that it was all taken out of context. I stayed quiet, arms still crossed, watching from the curb. She hadn't noticed me yet. "I'm the one being harassed," she screamed as two officers logged the weapon into evidence. "They moved in with their disruptive kid, turning this place into a circus. This is retaliation, abuse of power. I want to speak to the chief." That's when I stepped forward, just enough for her to see me. Her face drained as if someone had pulled the power cord from her soul. "Good morning, Karen," I said, voice calm. "You wanted the chief?" She stared at me, mouth half open. You did this? You're behind this?" "No," I said. "You did this. The moment you threatened to shoot my daughter on video in front of witnesses. I just made sure the system responded the way it was designed to." She stammered, her words collapsing into rage and sputtering indignation. "I was just scared. That child was acting strange. I didn't mean it." But there's no undo button when a threat is spoken and caught on camera. And that's the thing Karen never understood. Her status as HOA president didn't put her above the law. She had grown used to controlling people through fear and social pressure, used to getting her way by sheer force of personality. But she had never gone toe-to-toe with someone who lived in truth, law, and accountability. Her mistake wasn't just threatening a child. It was threatening my child and assuming I'd respond like everyone else in this neighborhood, passive, polite, and powerless. She didn't realize I'd been trained to respond to threats with strategy, structure, and swift legal action. I didn't need to yell or threaten her back. I just needed to follow the rules she thought didn't apply to her. As the officers departed, her confiscated firearm sealed and logged, Karen stood on her porch shaking, tears forming as the reality of what had just happened began to settle. She was no longer in control. Not of me, not of Lila, not of anyone. The fallout came fast. By the next morning, our story was everywhere. The ring footage had made it online, first through a community group, then picked up by local news. The caption beneath the video read, "HOA President Threatens to Shoot." Autistic child over sidewalk chalk. It went viral overnight. By Monday afternoon, national outlets were running it with full analysis, and the internet had a new villain. HOA Karen. People were outraged, not just at the threat itself, but at the coldness, the entitlement, the lack of humanity in her words. The pressure on the HOA board was immediate. Emergency meetings were called. Petitions flooded inboxes. Residents who had once kept their heads down suddenly found their voices. Karen was asked to step down within 48 hours, and when she refused, she was formally removed under a special vote. But the consequences didn't stop there. Child Services opened a protective inquiry. The police department launched an internal review of her concealed carry license, and with the evidence provided, it was suspended indefinitely. She'd gone from self-declared protector of the neighborhood to its biggest threat. And Lila? She watched everything unfold from our living room, curled in her favorite blanket, her stuffed dolphin cradled under one arm. She didn't fully understand the legal details, but she felt the shift. She knew in her way that something bad had been made right. One evening, after watching a news clip showing Karen's resignation, Lila looked up at me and whispered, "You protected me, Daddy." I knelt beside her, heart swelling and breaking at the same time. "Always," I said, "no matter what." And as I hugged her close, I knew this wasn't just about a victory. It was about reclaiming safety, restoring dignity, and reminding people like Karen that fear has no place in childhood, and power without compassion is nothing but cruelty. In disguise, Karen was banned from owning firearms permanently. The investigation had been thorough, and the court, after reviewing both the footage and her behavior patterns, deemed her unfit to carry. The red flag order turned into a full revocation, her permit was pulled, and any future applications would be denied without reconsideration. The message was loud and clear. Threats against children, especially vulnerable ones, would never be tolerated under the guise of fear or neighborhood safety. The HOA, under immense public and legal pressure, issued a formal apology not only to me and Lila but to the entire community. They released a statement acknowledging their failure to act on earlier complaints and condemning Karen's behavior as dangerous, discriminatory, and deeply unbecoming of our values. It was the kind of public reckoning most people never get to witness, let alone cause. But there it was, in black and white. The new HOA president, a soft-spoken single mother named Mariah who had once been too intimidated to speak up, invited Lila to her first meeting. Not to answer questions, not to apologize, but to be honored. They presented her with a small framed certificate, Pinewood Artist in Residence. I watched Lila accept it with wide eyes and a cautious smile, her little fingers brushing the gold trim. And from that moment on, the sidewalk chalk was never questioned again. It became something of a neighborhood treasure. People walked by and smiled. Some even joined in. Teenagers would kneel beside Lila and ask, "What's this one?" And she'd explain how the jellyfish floated in a candy ocean, or how the cats, wearing sunglasses, were actually royal guards. What once got us warnings now brought the street together. The board even voted, unanimously, to declare chalk art a recognized community enrichment activity. They put it in writing, as if to bury the past with something hopeful. Karen, on the other hand, couldn't bear it. After weeks of isolation, angry stares, and whispers that followed her every trip to the mailbox, she quietly put her house on the market. No goodbye, no apology, just a moving truck one Saturday morning, and by sundown, she was gone. The "For Sale" sign was replaced by a welcome mat from the new owners. 2 dads and a toddler who loved blowing bubbles into the breeze. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. As for me, I stayed on the force, but I made changes. After the dust settled, I submitted a request to move from full-time tactical command to a part-time instructor role. I began teaching tactical response and threat assessment at the academy, focusing more on the next generation than on the front line. It was time. I'd spent years training men and women to move fast, make split-second decisions, and protect the innocent. But now, I wanted slower mornings, wanted pancakes with Lila, sidewalk art critiques, quiet walks where she could tell me about blue whales or gravity or why flamingos stand on one leg. She needed more of me, and I was happy to give it. We found a new rhythm. Some mornings, I'd sit on the porch with coffee while she colored the driveway in pastels. She didn't always speak while she drew, but she didn't have to. Her pictures said everything. Some days were crowded with dragons, stars, and animal parades. Others were just one big shape, a heart, always outlined in pink, her favorite color. Then one afternoon, she finished a huge mural that stretched from our gate to the sidewalk, and in the center, inside a rainbow heart, she wrote in big, careful letters, "My daddy is a hero." I didn't cry, not then. I waited until she was in bed, then went outside, sat beside that chalk message, and let the tears fall silently onto the pavement. Because I had faced criminals, I had faced danger, I had led men into fire, but nothing had ever tested me like protecting my daughter from someone who saw her as less than human, and winning that battle, not with force, but with calm, law, truth, and community. That was the victory that mattered most. The neighborhood got quieter after Karen left. There were fewer arguments at meetings, fewer complaints in mailboxes. But it wasn't silent, not at all. There was always the sound of chalk scraping pavement, of tiny hands drawing wonder into the concrete, of kids laughing, parents talking, and lives unfolding. There was the sound of healing, of freedom, of a neighborhood finally learning how to make space for difference and finding beauty there. And through it all, Lila kept drawing. Her world had color again. And this time, no one would ever take it from her. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something deep about justice, parenting, or standing up for what's right, then don't let it end here. Share it. Talk about it. Let people know that fear and ignorance don't win when truth stands its ground. There are so many families like mine, so many children like Lila who deserve to be protected, seen, and celebrated. On my channel, HOA Karen, we expose these real stories of abuse of power, neighborhood injustice, and how ordinary people push back the right way with facts, courage, and heart. If you believe in that mission, hit subscribe, drop a comment, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because the more light we shine, the fewer shadows people like Karen can hide in. Stay strong, stay smart, and always stand up for your kids, your neighbors, and the truth.